Hello everyone and welcome back to Behind the Trowel. This week we're with the amazing Great British team who are on and off screen. Now this week we're in the beautiful National Trust site of Cherryburn, home to Thomas Bewick. Now it's a favourite episode for many in the room today, including Mr. John Henry Phillips.
What?
You're going to start annoying him straight away because he was very eager in this episode, and we saw that when we were watching the episode back.
Captain
I
King.
did a little refresh and watched it, and I've never seen you look so enthused. Like you were like excited. Like everyone could see how excited you were. So I think what we can do is do our usual lovely quick introductions. We will go with Marcus. You haven't been on, this is your first time this series. So Marcus, please introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And what's your role in the show?
I'm Marcus and I do all the 3D graphics and I visualize your interpretations.
Ooh,
that's what I'm going to say.
Very important role what you do. I mean, you bring it to life. Like when we talk about something like a fragment of pottery, you live to life so people can understand why we're so excited over something when they don't understand why we're excited. So important what you do. And you will see it all the time, all the visuals, Marcus, all the lovely designs. Okay, let's go to Mark, please, your role for this site.
Hello, I'm Mark Newman and I'm the Archaeological Consultant for the National Trust on the east side of our North region. So I advise and support our teams on about 75 National Trust properties in total, of which the lovely Cherryburn is one. And sometimes I get to do exciting, interesting, researchy sort of things, like we did when you came to visit, and most of the time I'll do the drains. And it's that kind of business of the everyday life of our properties, thinking about where there might be archaeology and where we can avoid damaging it, and where the day-to-day stuff needs to happen. It creates opportunities to learn more about the archaeology, so we build up more and more of a picture of the places that we care for, as the strapline goes, forever for everyone. So that's kind of how I fit into this.
Amazing. Chris Scott.
So my name's Chris and I am the archaeological consultant for the Great British Dig TV show. So it's my job to kind of work all the way from the beginning of the process, finding places where we might go and do work and make a program with the Great British Dig, and all the way through sort of working behind the scenes on the archaeology and designing the archaeology for the show, and then kind of out the end looking after all of the sort of post-excavation work and things like that that happens after the show.
And Chloe.
Hello, Chloe Duckworth, archaeologist, and well, this was quite a nice one for me because I'm based at Newcastle University and we got to bring some of our students there, and they were pretty local, some of them. One of them was from the next village over, so that was a really lovely part of this one.
And it was so nice as well to see their enthusiasm shine through on the programme. It was so nice, so many great bits. And last but not least, JH, John Henry.
Yeah, I'm John Henry. I'm one of the presenters on the Great British Dig. Yeah, it's great to be here.
I was expecting more then, but that's fine. I think you're just like, yeah.
More of a kind of like rock star, like I'm about to start a set. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Thank you, Cherryburn.
And hey everyone, I'm Natasha Bilson. I'm one of the archaeologists or co-presenters on the Great British Dig, and I sometimes like to annoy people. So if you saw my latest Instagram video, you will see how I like to annoy people in the trench. And I found that video on my phone today, and I don't know, Chris, if you've seen it, or Mark, but it's me to sing a song about Cherryburn that was filmed off the cuff by John Henry, features Chloe, and at the end we have some actual musical talent, which is by John playing the guitar at the end, whilst one of Chloe's students found a piece of plaster that was painted. So yeah, there we go. That is over on Instagram.
Excellent.
Watch it, laugh at it, please.
Yeah, we did. That was the week There was a lot of random walking around playing the guitar. I think we all went a bit folk that week. Something about Cherryburn. It was just like folk vibes. We've lost Tash, haven't we? We've got no leader.
Oh,
What's going to happen?
it's raining cats and dogs where she is, apparently. It's interfering with the interweb. So she may be a bit cummy and goey as this chat goes on.
Well, the cat's away. No, actually, she's back.
What's everyone's oh, I am the host now. Oh no, the pressure.
Go for it.
So what's everyone's favorite thing about Tash?
My favorite thing about Tash used to be just her personality, but now it's the fact that she's so good at annoying you.
Oh, I tell you what, do you see, well, when you go and watch that video that of her singing the song, she doesn't mention that there's like 20 seconds of the most unflattering angle of me ever. She must have been like on her knees, like filming me upwards. I just look like some sort of space monster. I'm glad she put that on there. Yeah. So I'll take the lead if Tash isn't gonna come back. So obviously Cherryburn was a favorite of some of ours. Chris, perhaps you'd like to tell us why you put forward Cherryburn for one of the episodes.
I'm happy to. Principally, amongst many reasons, is it's close to my house.
I always thought that. I suspected it from the off.
And I did. I know when we did a series of the Great British Dig, which was 10 episodes long, and we worked out that I could have driven to Baghdad on the mileage. So this time I got my own back and picked somewhere, was able to work somewhere close to my house. But that, far more important than any of that, was both through knowing Mark, I've been able to do work at Cherryburn previously. So some of the kind of story of the episode is based on work that I've done with Mark at Cherryburn previously, which meant that we had a real head start, I think, in terms of all of the pre-work that goes on, in terms of thinking about how the Great British Dig can contribute to finding out more about a place, but also kind of what is the story that we can tell, and how can the Great British Dig kind of add value to that story. And Cherryburn was a really, really brilliant opportunity that came along, both in terms of the National Trust needing and wanting to do some work, and us needing and wanting to make a TV show. So from that point of view, kind of lots of things came together. But for me personally, I think it was just a brilliant opportunity to contribute and be part of a story that I've been, as I say, I've done some work on before, but also just is fascinating, and also involves real people. All of archaeology involves real people, but real people in terms of historic people who actually have names. We know their names, we know where they lived, we know who they were related to, we know what they did for a job, and possibly more important than any of that, we actually have their own words. In terms of Thomas Bewick, we have his own memoir where he talks himself in his own words about his own life at this place, which is just such a powerful thing that I think we're really, really lucky to get, and you don't get all that often in archaeology. So,
and I mean, I think the piece of work that Chris and I worked on previously for Cherryburn, we did the archaeological survey for the property, and we looked at the significance of a place, and basically you can kind of characterize the heritage importance about places, about evidential, so how archaeological is it, what physical evidence there is of the past, or historical, so was it the place where light bulb was invented, or is it associated with X, Y, or Z? Aesthetic, so is it part of designed landscape and it was a thing of beauty, intended to be a thing of beauty, or has it become one? And then social communal, so how people connect with the place. And Cherryburn isn't quite what you expect it to be, that we sell it, it is known as Bewick's birthplace, which of course it is. But the reality is that the main house, which we use as a base and where so many of the property's activities come from, was built in the 1820s by Bewick's brother. It wasn't there when he was born. And the range of farm buildings that we had in the background to the excavations, well, they were there in Bewick's time, but oddly enough, he wasn't born in the donkey shed. You know, so all the power of the place is about its association with Bewick, and to a degree, the social communal stuff, at being a National Trust place, it's a piece of heritage that the public have access to. But the really important bit is the associative stuff. But there is, you know, although it's got birthplace bolted on to the bit next door, that wasn't his birthplace. So everything that you did was turning that idea of associative value into bang, evidential value, but something real survived from that. And that was the bit we just didn't know whether there was going to be anything beneath the ground or not.
Always a risk, isn't it? It's just worth updating everybody on Tash. So she has said, because she's had this problems with her connectivity, she's going to stay so to make sure that it continues streaming, but stay with her video microphone off, which means that we're in charge. Scary thought. Cherryburn, what's everyone's favourite type of burn? Only joking. I'm only joking.
Robert.
I'm just trying to,
Robert Burns.
Robert Burns. I'm only trying to frighten Tash because I know she's watching.
Chris,
she's just written in the text. Oh,
Chris,
Tash,
what kind of work had you done previously at Cherryburn? Was it very expensive, or?
So I was commissioned by Mark to do an archaeological survey of the whole land holding at Cherryburn that the National Trust looks after, which was a brilliant starting point to allow this episode to go ahead, in that we know now an awful lot more about this place than we did before that work was done. And we traced the property all the way back to the medieval period, and then all the way through to its Second World War history at the other end. So a little part of the property that we didn't visit in the episode was used for gardens gardens for digging for victory in the Second World War, and all the way back to being a sort of a medieval and post-medieval small holding that the Bewicks took over in the 18th century and lived there. And I think one of the really interesting things about it is that as a farm, it's so small and a tiny little place. When other farms in that area grew to be much larger units,
Chris, you've lost your accordion, mate.
So can't help it. Just this place stayed as a tiny little farm when other farms grew up into much larger things in the revolution of that time in agriculture. But part of the reason for that, of course, was that the Bewicks gained some of their money from the coal industry. So they actually, Bewick's dad, John, had a pit in Mickley where Cherryburn is, and so I think they gained a lot of their income from that rather than actually farming.
So the work that Chris is talking about, it's kind of the bread and butter job for archaeology in the National Trust. What we aim to do is, for every property, we have an archaeological and historical landscape survey. So we've done a walkover survey and seen all physical evidence on the ground, and then documentary research into what archaeology has been done previously, and trying to draw that together into a narrative of land use on the site. So that looking forwards, we identify what heritage assets we're looking after on the property, make sure we don't knock into them in the ordinary day-to-day run of things. So the standard we're aiming for is, if we're ever doing a piece of work that we require planning permission, we will know at very least as much as the local authority archaeologists will know about the place, and often we know rather more than that, though we take the records that we generate through these surveys and place them in the local authority historic environment records, so the public have access to that information as well.
One of the things I really liked about doing this episode, apart from the fact that there was that there was so much to it, and it really felt like we genuinely transformed the picture. I mean, what really struck me is that people have been visiting this site of Bewick's birthplace for so long, and actually missing a huge part of that picture. And a huge part of that was this discovery, and I hope I'm not leaping ahead too much, but of the blue painted plaster in that room, which I mean, everything we found about this part of the house that had been lost was absolutely extraordinary and just transformed our picture. But there was this blue painted plaster, and it was this beautiful colour. Tash is here, not able obviously to stream at the moment, but she has sent a few messages over. I just wanted to come to that. So she's sent over a question from Rosie, which I think is Rosie who joined us in Bognor, actually. So hi Rosie, it's great that you're joining us for these live streams. I'm really looking forward to that episode as well that you're going to be on. But she's asked, how was the colour blue perdita of paint on the plaster identified? I don't actually know the answer to that. I'm hoping that Chris and Mark might. But I also wanted to ask Marcus about this, because I know that you were responsible for this reconstruction, which we see at the end, beautiful reconstruction at the end of the episode with the light streaming in. It's a very evocative thing, I think. You dig this place, and we've actually gone and just got this really visceral understanding of what it was like at the time. So first question, how was that colour identified? And then kind of leading on from that, it'd be good to hear a bit from Marcus maybe about reconstructing that.
So I'll take the plaster bit then. So obviously the colour was very clear on site. I think probably even clearer on site than it actually showed up on the TV. And there was just an absolute load of it, and it was quite clear that obviously what had happened is they'd taken the building down. They'd taken it down in upon itself in many ways. The walls had come down, and we had more and more and more pieces of plaster, and certainly a lot more than was than got a chance to show in the episode. And in terms of the blue color and so on, the identification of that was more just a general, that's the kind of most common blue paint in use at that time. So it wasn't, we haven't done any actual chemical analysis of that or anything like that. It's just a common paint color at the time, but it certainly matches what we found on site.
It was really, you're right, Chris, when you said that, it really popped, in the ground. When you're digging archaeology, you get quite used to seeing different shades because it's part of what we're looking at in the soil. But when something like that, just blue, just pops out at you, it's just like,
wow. Yeah. No, it was really lovely. And obviously, because everyone thinks of the past in black and white, and actually Thomas Bewick's work is there. It's mostly black and white, but it really did.
It's almost like you've seen the program, Chris, because someone said that at the end. But yeah, you carry on, mate. It was an original talk.
They did, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, brilliant. There we go.
It was brilliant. It was great when they did it, but it's fabulous when you've done it. Honestly,
it's all about the delivery.
Yeah.
So,
I've got to say that I just want. This is a behind the scenes show, live stream. I think Chris has every right to every so often pinch one of our lines, because I'm pretty sure I've pinched some of his and said them to camera. I'm pretty sure that you've got 400 bored blokes when we were back in Calstock came from Chris. They're going to want to go down to the Weepers and spend some money. So Chris, you take those things
I'll
back.
steal ahead.
Take those jokes back. They're yours.
Yeah. So, they're mainly the dad jokes, to be honest, but fair enough, I'll take them. So I've forgotten where I was going now, but it was just fabulous to see that, and I think above anything else, it was one of the things that put that space back together in our mind's eye, and then on Marcus's keyboard, of course. But it really just, it put the people back in the in the room, I think, and put the room back around the people who, you know, who've got their own words. So I think that was just brilliant to find that.
Marcus, you don't feature in the show. You weren't actually present on site, were you? But you actually were responsible for that beautiful reconstruction at the end. What was the process there? Presumably you had to communicate with the excavators and Chris.
Yeah, well, I will stick with the paint, actually, because it's very rare that you actually get the actual colours that have been used in the rooms on the walls. Sometimes you get fragments of wallpaper in buildings and stuff, but quite often nothing. So I sort of approach it like I would as if we were going to reconstruct that in the real world. So I contacted a manufacturer of historic paints and got them to send me the colour so that I could then digitize that colour into the computer and use that. So it would be the same way that you would do it if the National Trust were to basically do up a room in a historic colour. You know where to go to buy the paints and get them made up. So that's exactly what I would do. So that's, I mean,
that's mind-blowing. That's extraordinary. I genuinely didn't realize the degree of, you know, research that goes into that. Not saying I appreciate how difficult it is to produce these reconstructions, but actually going to the extent of making sure you get the exact correct shade. I think that's amazing. I imagine that most people watching the show would never have considered that. So
can I just say Marcus was considerably cheaper doing that than the decorators we usually use.
Yeah. I can imagine. I have actually reconstructed wallpaper for a few houses as well. So we've had different fragments of wallpaper, and then I've had to make the pattern, find the colours, put it all together. So it's actually quite and then create the room with the period wallpaper in.
Yeah.
It's something that I've done before, so it's quite good, quite exciting actually to find the colour.
I think as well, Marcus, obviously we had images of the outside of the building. There's one from
it was an etching with a window.
Etching with a window.
Yeah. From a distance.
Yes, yeah. 1780s etching done by Thomas Bewick's brother, and that was obviously Marcus had to then turn that effectively inside out, add it to the other to look at it from the inside, and add obviously all of our excavators.
It was the excavation that really helped. I mean, having the location of the fireplace, the doors, you know, the steps, everything, and you know, it's that really kind of ties it in together. And then you had that plan that was discovered. Well, it was surveyor's notes, more than a plan, wasn't it? Because it's not necessarily drawn to scale, but it's annotated to scale. So it's something you would take and then draw up later, I think. So it would be like a sketch that you draw up, and you add those annotations on, and then that would have become a plan that may have been drawn up or may not have been drawn up, but it's like those notes.
Yeah.
So having that and the archaeology, and I had the plans from site as well. So I could fit it all in together rather nicely.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. If anybody who's watching this who hasn't seen the episode yet, absolutely recommend watching it because it is extraordinary. I think that reconstruction really brings home how much our little dig has added to the picture. The other thing that really struck me about this site was just how many finds we got. And I know that Hannah can't be with us today because I believe she's in Abu Dhabi doing some very cool stuff. But she was in the finds tent with just an extraordinary number of things coming in. And a lot of that I know is because after that part of the house was demolished, it was then being used later in the 19th century as one of these sort of, you know, waste dumps. And so we got all these incredible finds out of that, very, very informative about that period of use of the area. And I just wondered if anyone had any favourite finds or there were any kind of, you know, anything that they wanted to flag up. I know I've got a couple.
I have. I think I've probably got two. One is the cartwheel Pennie that we saw in the episode, which was just a lovely thing but more than it's sort of, everyone thinks, oh, coin, that's fabulous. And in that sense, it is, and it's interesting, and it's interesting dating information. But quite apart from that, it was just the sheer look, really, that the date of that coin, 1797, chimed with the publication of Bewick's British Birds publication, which was his most famous book. Was just a real little moment of joy, I think, that archaeology gives you every so often. Just a lovely little thing to find that in that place. I mean,
I think the finds are all really vivid, but you get asked that question about favourite finds a lot, and I'm always really boring about it. And actually, the stuff that pushes my buttons was the fabric of the building itself.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how program is edited and constructed directs a narrative. So, I mean, often with a show, you want a quest, you want an objective. Sometimes it's referred to as peril, which drives the program forward. And the direction that the edit took with this one made a lovely story and a great episode. But kind of from behind the camera, and why we were interested in having the work done in the first place, it was a different peril, which is, we kind of knew where the hovel should be, the bit that he was born in. So that part wasn't a shocker. But until you put the first spade in the ground, we genuinely didn't know if there would be a scrap of that building surviving. You know, it was completely untested previously. And our operational reasons is because we connected with Bewick. It would be great if we could actually show a representation of the building where he was born. But we wouldn't just slam something on the surface that we'd made up. So we needed to know, is there anything from which this can be reconstructed? And the quality of our archaeology, with plaster work in place on the wall, paint on the plaster, the different types of paving, the program, it's like the color blue didn't quite come out. The detail of that hearth was really exceptional. And, you know, we now know that there is fabric there, which, if it's the direction we decide to take it in, we can conserve and present. So all that built stuff in place for me was the star find.
Yeah.
What about you, John Henry?
Obviously, I mean, I liked the egg. The most simple answer. That was really cool. I liked Hugh's question in the show where he said, "Why didn't they just use a real egg?" I thought that's classic Hugh delivery of that line. What did they call? What was the proper name for it?
Broody egg.
Broody egg. Yeah.
So this is this ceramic egg that you use to help the chickens lay.
Yeah. And I watched the episode of my dad, and he was like, "Oh, I remember my granddad had one of those." So that was quite a nice little moment to share. So the egg, you know, artifact wise, but a bit like Mark, really, I was amazed by the, you know, just finding that actual building with the plaster on the walls and the color on the walls. It was just absolutely mind blowing, really. You know, the fireplace in place, everything was just there, and it was like we'd sort of like walked in on a moment in time, you know, which was so amazing.
The answer to Hugh's question about the egg, you see, it's a kind of economic advantage thing. If you take a fresh egg and you stick it under a chicken until it lays another fresh egg, but your first one's gone off, then you kind of stayed where you are. Whereas if you shove a ceramic one in, you've got a ceramic egg and a fresh egg, which feels a bit more like a result.
Very true. Very true.
Looks like we've lost Tash. I don't 100% know if this means we're still streaming, but we are still recording, so we can at least put it out online.
There's a button at the top of the screen that still says live.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's all good. So what about you, Chloe? What was your favourite?
Well, I mean, I really enjoyed the broody egg as well. I think it was for similar reasons to what John Henry said. A lot of people sort of went, I remember this. I remember one of these, or I remember someone I knew had one of these. And also, I have this long-standing sort of ambition to one day be able to keep chickens and or ducks. Can't really do it at the moment because I have to travel too much. Wouldn't be fair on them, but you know, just love that all to do. I just want to get up in the morning and get some fresh eggs, fresh from the hen. So I love that. There was a strange one where we had to sniff this mystery alcohol.
Oh yeah.
I mean, to say, you know, I sort of, they were already opening the bottle, and I sort of came over and said, whoa. But we looked at the bottle and went, okay, it is only about 100 years old. I guess it's okay to open it and have a sniff. And then I, of course, like an absolute fool, stuck it right there and went, and so I got a really good swig, and it was very, very strong. And I sort of reeled backwards, and Hugh Dennis was laughing his head off. But I really enjoyed that because my students are there, and they're doing this sort of, you know, proper sort of like sommelier descriptions of what they thought it might be, this mystery alcohol. So that was just quite a fun moment, really. And, you know, I mean, there were a lot of finds. Hannah was, I quite enjoyed just going to the finds tent and going, flipping heck, like it was rammed, and Hannah's just there busily trying to manage them all. So that was quite entertaining as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
actually, there was another one, sorry if I may say, I'm taking over, but there was an eye bath as well.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed asking Hannah about this eye bath, and she's saying, oh, they just put some saline solution and just swoosh it back into their eyes. That was fab. I love learning about that, because it looks like an egg cup, but it's not right, because it's slightly too oval to be an egg cup.
Yeah. And it's not going to be Bewick himself, because it's that bit later. But the connection it made for me when I was watching the program, and first time I saw it is when it aired, was that your eyes would get tired doing engraving work, and the idea you could freshen them up with a solution in this eye bath seemed to be a really nice connection of themes.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
There's a lot of that in the finds. Just lots of themes were picked up, I think, of the place, and the people were picked up in the finds.
Well, one of the themes for me was Hugh telling us all that the bones that we have found all represent the Sunday roast, and it was a picture with the jaw with teeth in it. I'm thinking, I'm not going to come to dinner if they invite me again. But the bones are really good, weren't they, Chris, with what Hannah's been saying about?
They were, yeah. So it's another sort of extra to the episode. After the episode, obviously, after all the episodes, we have post-excavation work that carries on, and all of our work on the Great British Dig is reported, as it would be with any professional archaeological piece of work. So actually, Hannah, who obviously it's quite obvious from the programme, is an animal bone specialist, has been looking at the animal bone, and all that pig bone that I think was displayed in the programme turns out to be really, really interesting in terms of a real fantastic case study, really, in the economy of these small farms, and how they were clearly rearing pigs there and then slaughtering them, presumably not just for their own use, but also clearly exporting all of this meat from the pigs off the farm. But what's lovely, and again, this didn't make it into the show because it wasn't relevant to the work that we're doing, but at Cherryburn is a really or a slightly unusual nationally type of building called a pultigary, which is where they have the hens upstairs and pigs downstairs in one farm building shared. And it's really interesting to put that building, what we know about the historic buildings at Cherryburn, together with the animal bone that got chucked on the rubbish heap at the end of the sort of farming process on the farm. And as a sort of case study, Hannah, anyway, doesn't know of another way. Wouldn't be interesting if I didn't know of another one, because I wouldn't be. But Hannah doesn't know of another case study sort of putting together these 18th century farm buildings with the animal bone that they produced, if you like, out of the end of the farming process. So from that point of view, it's going to end up, I think, being a really, really interesting archaeological story, particularly for those people fascinated by animal bone.
You're right. I really like that associative thing with the buildings and the bones. Sorry, Clay.
No, so I just, in the interests of trying to represent Tash, and just to say, Tash, it is not easy to do this job, and we appreciate you and we want you back. And let's hope you get your internet sorted for next week. But I just pulled up the comments, people's comments and questions on my screen, and I do apologise to everybody. I have been building furnaces. I've got clayey hands. The camera on my laptop is weirdly placed down there, so I'm sorry for anyone who's had to look at my horrible giant clay spider hands. But I can now see the comments, and so I just wanted to say I quite enjoyed this one from Steve. I was about to say annexed to the fines tent required for this one. This is after we mentioned the number of fines.
Yeah.
And then Rothy's asked, what other fines were found in the kitchen garden trench off screen? I think that was actually Tash who was in that one.
It was. I probably feel that one. We didn't find a lot, is the truth of it, actually. That in itself is interesting in that clearly I think that suggests that the equivalent midden that we did dig after Bewick's time at Cherryburn, we still haven't found it. So there's still presumably a midden somewhere at Cherryburn.
It was in that one.
It was. That we haven't found for Thomas Bewick's time. That one. We didn't find a lot, is the truth of it, actually. That in itself, in that clearly I think that suggests that the equivalent midden that we did.
What?
Is somebody echoing back there? Is that?
Yeah, it was doing. It's almost as if a playback was playing over us. But we're back. We're back live.
That's so trippy.
Yeah,
I thought it was a bit of a Black Mirror moment.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was happening online or in reality.
Yeah.
I thought, am I going to have to listen to Chris talking about an unproductive trench for the rest of eternity?
No.
Like my own personal groundhog.
I mean, I think that the midden stuff we didn't quite end up explaining it, but the point is that before dustbin men were a thing, that household waste was piled up, and then the organic part of it rotting down is dug in to fertilize the ground. So on a large scale, the biggest of them I've ever come across was working in the fields around Fountains Abbey, and the monks' waste was put on a midden and then spread in the fields. So I've never had this from field walking before. There was a big collection of medieval floor tiles, ones that had come loose and just with the sweepings got collected up and then spread on the fields. And you could actually, in theory, you'd spread it evenly everywhere, but actually everybody just starts shoveling when they come through the gates. You could actually see where the gates were in the medieval field boundaries that are long since been removed and the fields enlarged. But we also looked at Woolsthorpe Manor, which was Isaac Newton's birthplace many years ago. And there was an idea that we might grow stuff for the cafe in what had been the historic kitchen garden. We started doing a little bit of thinking about that, and wouldn't it be exciting if the pottery from the 17th century there was actually Newton's tableware? But then the thinking went a bit further. But when he sat under the apple tree and discovered slapstick and gravity in the same moment in 1667, he'd come home from Cambridge because there was plague in the city, but he was actually mostly doing alchemy at that time. So you've got to think out a bit laterally that if he's come home with his ideas and his stuff and he's messing about with alchemy and they don't really understand about toxins and how nasty things, what's he going to do with the stuff that's wasted? Well, he'll probably put it on the Midland and they'll dig it into the kitchen garden. So we did a little bit of testing, and sure enough, there were heavy metals and nasties that shouldn't have been in the soil, which in all likelihood were the leftovers from the tinkering that Newton was doing.
He wasn't big on health and safety, Isaac Newton. No. He stuck a needle in his eye. But
well, I told you he invented slapstick.
Not slapstick.
I mean, to sort of bring it back to Cherryburn, I think, obviously we know that you have to have a waste dump somewhere. So you have the later waste dump where it used to be a part of the house. And I think what we were saying is that we hadn't found the earlier waste dump when Bewick was living there. And obviously that must be there somewhere, Mark. So that's an exciting project for the future.
But I think what Chris was picking up was that there wasn't a lot of material in this kitchen garden. So it's saying it wasn't used over a long period of time. You're absolutely right. It must be somewhere else, and that's work for the future.
Yeah.
And is there work for the future planned? I ask this knowing that there is, but
So yes, there is. We're taking bit by bit. We've still to do the thinking about whether or not we want to conserve these remains. We want to put them on display. I'm edging it that way, but everything has to be paid for, and we have to be sure it's the right thing to do. So we are thinking that there might be a part 2 for the excavation, because as everyone will have seen when they saw the program, we kind of half sectioned the building, so the further half is still yet to dig. But meanwhile, that exciting business of keeping National Trust places going is we've got really serious damp problems in the standing buildings, the thing that's been called the birthplace up until now. So we're going to need to put new drainage in outside that gable wall where you had your socks blown off by the alcohol, Chloe. So we're going to go back and dig that as part of Festival of British Archaeology. So the trench that we need to do for the drainage, we will do that, and we will talk to anybody who's in the area and wants to come in and enjoy archaeology actually happening right there in front of them in real life.
You know, there's a lot in this. I mean, Mark, you've alluded to not everything coming across on the screen. You know, there has to be an edit. There has to be a particular story in the edit, and you know, you've got 2 or 3 film crews working for a week, so much material. And I think one of the things that really, as an experience of actually being at the site and working there, was the gardeners. And it's always this with the National Trust properties, you know, these amazing teams of gardeners who maintain these beautiful properties. It was very much the case at the other 2 we've worked out with you, Mark, at Benningborough and Studley. And, you know, here it was because it's a smaller property, but it is so pretty. It's just so pretty. And it has this sort of, it's like a little oasis, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is. Shout out to them.
Well, and I mean, I think that's interesting as well. People go there for the birthplace thing, but it struck me when I was first getting to know the property just how amazing those views over the Tyne Valley are. I mean, they really are worth going to the place if it had no other connections at all. And on the other side of the house, from where you were looking, there is a kind of slightly projecting platform in the topography, which is now the back of the house bit where the gardeners have got their sheds and stuff like that. But I keep looking at it and think that's the best view up the valley from anywhere on this property. And I'm sure that was part of the gardens of the early 19th century farmhouse, and they would have made something about it. The Ordnance Survey depiction kind of shows something there. So maybe one day we'll nudge the gardeners out, even though they are entirely lovely, into somewhere that doesn't have quite such amazing landscape views. But it hasn't happened yet.
There was another nice little thing about this. There was a story. There's a story of the bricks. Do you know, every week on the live stream, I think we should have Brick of the Week, because we always have Brick of the Week when we're actually filming, don't we? There were the Mickleby bricks. They had this different clay that they were using. It didn't look like most of the bricks. I think, you know, I just wanted to. Yay!
It's one of your Benningborough bad boys from the Benningborough episode.
Break of the week. John Henry, you said you kind of wanted to live in Cherryburn. You were why did you like that place so much?
Oh well, obviously the beautiful views. Just absolutely stunning. I'd never really been up to that part of England before. I'd gone past it quite a bit, but yeah, I never really pulled in to that area, and I was absolutely amazed by it. The gardens, absolutely stunning. The quaintness of the little house, amazing. And you've probably heard me bang on loads of times by now, but like I just adore places where sort of artists and authors lived. That's like I often joke, like reading about authors and artists' lives is like the one passion I haven't ruined by turning it into a job. So it's one of the only things I've got left that I just do for no monetary gain at all. And as a result, I so absolutely adore it. So yeah, just getting to, you know, be in that, well, not just be at Cherryburn, but be able to play such a role in sort of looking into the history of it was such a privilege. I just love it. I love woodcut artists. I love, where do I start? I just really liked it. It was just such a joy to do that week. And yeah, and then being able to go into the print room and see where they made the prints and see the actual the little museum they've got there with all the original woodcuts and stuff. And I think I was watching the episode with some family, and I was trying to explain to them, like, you see the woodcuts in the episode and they look impressive there, but they absolutely do no justice whatsoever to seeing them in real life. Just the actual like intricacy of them and how amazing they really are, and that ability of Bewick to create those on such tiny little blocks of wood just blew me away. I'd never seen them in real life until we did that episode. It's just absolutely stunning, isn't it? The way,
yeah.
Obviously that's why he was the best. But yeah, I mean, you just forget really, and then you see it, it's just like, oh my god. You know?
When I was at university, one of our lecturers in British archaeology was a specialist in Anglo-Saxon and Viking jewellery. It was one of his many areas of expertise. And you know how you get sort of knot work in jewellery of that period, really intricate stuff. And he used to think, you know, what they do is you take your brooch off and while you're drinking mead with someone, chuck it over to someone and go on, trace which beast goes where as they interweave. But it's such a precision piece of creation. His theory was that the craftsmen were probably people who suffered from myopia, who weren't, you know, because of their extreme short-sightedness, weren't good for very much else in the pre-modern world. But this was something where their disability became a positive attribute, and that, you know, they would be able to work close up on the detail of this thing. So I've often wondered just how good Bewick's eyesight was. I mean, the fact that he appreciated nature in the landscape, you know, suggests that wasn't where he started out, but working so intimately, closely with tiny things, you do wonder, you know, what strain were his eyes under over the course of his working life.
It's a lovely idea, but as someone who is quite myopic, it has not given me the superpower of working close up at all. So I don't know about the science behind that one. I would love it if it did. That would be great. I know I'm going to be one of those people who's constantly having to flip varifocals or flip glasses very soon, because I can feel that coming on now as well. Marcus, did you, it must have been quite challenging to reconstruct the house without being there. Were you after seeing the episode and kind of maybe getting more of a sense of that place, did you feel that, you know, you were happy with that reconstruction? Because personally I felt that it really showed what was there. And then the other kind of question I had about that was that, how do you choose how much detail to put into a reconstruction? How do you say, well, you know, we've got to build this, we know some of this, we've got to reconstruct other bits? And do you go quite minimal, or how do you do that?
It depends on, well, it's kind of like building a set for a movie. It depends on where your camera is going to go and what it's going to capture, as to how much detail that you're going to include in a certain shot. So in terms of like the back wall, the gable wall didn't have much detail on it, because we were primarily coming in through the door, turning and seeing the fireplace, and then originally they wanted to turn around again and then go up the stairs, but that's a lot of spinning which if you appreciate doing a full 180 in a little room like that, it's going to look kind of really awkward. It was like a game maneuver. It would look like really awkward. So I opted for the camera just to rise up through the ceiling into the room above, rather than follow this path that went up the stairs and around, because it's such a small space, you've got tight angles, it's going to look really really awkward and might make you quite dizzy. So in that sense, but once you've worked out where the camera is going to go, then the main focus of the attention of the reconstruction elements that are in front of the camera, with less detail behind. Of course, if you were doing a VR type thing, you would have to do the detail all around, because you're giving people the kind of the ability to look in all directions and explore on their own. But with that particular type of shot, you've got one, so it's one take, one fluid camera movement that goes in and up. So that's why that's that's how we kind of decide where to put the detail in. And then that's very important for that little window. Really, that little window was a very important feature. So that had to feature prominently. So as soon as it came up, we had to see that. And so obviously the light is different from different directions. From downstairs, the light shining through from one direction, and upstairs the light shining through from another direction. But the idea was to emphasize the space itself and how the space was lit. And upstairs, no reason why, if you're going upstairs, it doesn't, the time hasn't changed, but the light comes through the window, because the window is the more important feature upstairs, because it's mentioned. So yeah.
And you finished.
I never even noticed that.
Yeah, it's different angles. The sun is from a different angle.
And between the rafters, you had it kind of white plastered. Did we find any of that, or?
I don't know if I did. Did I?
Yeah.
I think it might have just been boarded, actually.
Well, or boarded, because I think we'd probably have expected that it was ling thatch, seeing as the
Oh,
there
yeah,
were,
yes, up the top.
up
Yeah.
under the eaves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But Chris, I don't know if you've come across treatments, sort of flashings or whatever, underneath thatched roofs. I'm trying to lead you back to Seaton Delaval and the I forget what you called it, the lot where the ceiling line was on the end gable wall.
Oh, a raggle.
Raggle, that's
There we go,
that's
yeah.
the one. Yeah.
Will we have the raggle of the week now?
Raggle.
Because, I just want to say, Steve Jeffrey has called us nerds for talking about bricks.
Outrageous.
Yeah, wear that with pride. Absolutely.
Yeah. I can't remember. I think there's evidence that the building was thatched from the engraving, I think.
Yeah, it's from the engraving, yeah.
Yeah. And also, obviously, the standing building currently, the roof is at such an acute angle that suggests it was very much created to be thatched rather than a shallower angle where it would have been tiled or slated. But
You're a cute angle, Chris.
thanks very much.
As opposed to being a mildly attractive Saxon.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying that just obviously Marcus has said it really, really elegantly there, but so much evidence from so many different angles went into that reconstruction. From all the archival plans, everything that we found on site, and all that sort of stuff. It sort of fed into Marcus's brain, came out with a wonderful image that that was just brilliant, really brought it to life, I think. But it's both lovely from a point of view of finding all of that stuff and bringing it together, but also just the opportunity to see that and experience it was brilliant. Really loved that.
Yeah, that little window for me, which you see in the older engraving of the house, and then which was in that reconstruction, and which is this thought of Thomas Bewick growing up, looking out of that little window at the beautiful nature around him, and this, being part of his journey to becoming this fabulous engraver, I think is just a beautiful, it's the part of that story that really sits with me. It's absolutely lovely. And I'm really happy that we were able to pull that together. I noticed that really, Tash is back, Mum's home.
I'm so proud of all of you for holding the fort. It was great. I've not been able to listen to anything. I don't know if you can even hear me.
We can.
Yes,
maybe.
We can.
But look, I don't know if you can hear me, but look, I got a bit of a Bewick. I got on eBay.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no, it's blurry. But anyway, you can see for scale, it's tiny.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you're going, Chris. Sorry.
I was just going to say, just about the window, obviously, just in case people didn't kind of fully get that. It's Bewick talks about this window at his bedhead in his memoir, and how important it was to him that was, and he calls it his window onto the world. So to see that both in the engraving, then obviously to put that back together with the physical remains of the building and know exactly in space where that sat. And obviously John Henry describes it and points that out in the episode. But also, I think what's lovely is the plan that Peter and Hugh look at in the archive has that, and again they did point this out in the episode, has that written on window at the bedhead. But I think what's also lovely, again not mentioned in the episode, is that plan was drawn by Thomas Bewick's son Robert, and so Robert had clearly read the memoir or knew of the significance of the windows and felt it so important that he actually felt moved to write that on what is otherwise quite a sort of technical drawing of the building, felt moved to write that on and make it very clear where that window sat, and therefore sort of pointing really, I think, to clearly how important Thomas Bewick felt it was, but then carrying that forward in the family to his son and his own view of his dad, and his dad's growing up in that room, I think is just lovely to put that back in.
It's absolutely beautiful. I'm going to make it very cheesy now, but we did open up a little window onto that by what we did there, and I just love that as a circular story, that we opened up a window onto this window, onto his experience growing up, and it's a great beautiful story.
I should say as well, what the other thing on that, just from that sort of point of Bewick growing up there, the other side of it as well is that the archaeology that you described in the programme, Chloe, about how the wall and the part of the building that we looked at connected to the existing building that you can see, and we found a bit of evidence of obviously this being an addition to that building, but then also how the door that went nowhere came to be. But all of that really ties together really, really well with or other documentary sources that we have about when the building might have been built, but also when it came to an end. Thomas Bewick talks about it in the 1820s in a letter to his friend. He talks about the building being very old and it might be pulled down at some point.
I just have to say we are coming to the end of the live stream time, so we will need to wrap this up. But I think, Mark, you wanted to say something.
I was just going to say, but the mysteries for the future, we heard about lovely stuff about the door that doesn't go anywhere, etc., etc. But what you haven't got round is that the floor level of that room and the floor level of the room you excavated has got about 2 foot difference between them. So it was a heck of a first step when you went through that doorway. So still not entirely sure we understand how that works.
No.
But that's the fun. We can go back and have another go at that. Maybe we'll get it in a couple of weeks' time when we're digging out there again.
That's beautiful. I just want to say thanks to everyone who's been joining us on the live stream. I am not as good at Tash, as good as Tash is at connecting between what people are saying, but we've had some lovely comments. Beautiful world. Chris, that feels so emotional. With what you were just describing then. So if we can hear Tash, hopefully she'll be able to wrap this up. I'm not sure. Can you hear us, Tash?
Hi, I can hear you now. So I just want to say thank you all so much for tuning in for the live stream, and thanks again to the team. You guys did so well. I'm so proud. So for those of you who have not watched the episode, the link to the live stream, to the actual live, or the episodes in general are in the description below. I'm going to put Mark, do we have a website link for the excavations at Cherryburn?
Not at the moment, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I mean, it's one of the things now in that part of Northumberland, everything has to be communicated by woodcut.
So if and when we get a link, I'll add that into the description as well, just in case anyone nearby would like to head over there. It's a beautiful location. It's historic in itself, and just to be there for the archaeological excavation, you can't miss out on it if you live locally. So thank you all so much for tuning in. If you're watching this on catch up, leave your questions in the comment section, and we can always answer them in the next live stream. Next week, we're going to be going live on Monday at 6 p.m. with James Wright, who was one of our main experts on the dig. And of course, we will have the usual on and off screen team as well. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Have a lovely week. And we'll see you on Thursday when we all go to Strelly Hall. Bye. I'm not sure if it's going to work.